I was invited to go to like the 93-20 event that City had. And I thought that's really cool that they invite me. But then all the guys who were on stage, they're all City guys like Gareth Barry, Nigel de Jongs, Michael Richards, Joe Lescott's, all people like that. But I can't sit next to them because they won the game. I lost the game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What? If someone asked me a question, what am I going to say? Oh yeah, it felt great. It turns out those were the 3 points that kept us up.
Yeah.
Those are the 3 points that meant, to go back a bit, that meant that when we were headed to City, we were above the line, we were above the relegation line, and we didn't have to go to City to win, to stay up, or to have a chance of staying up.
Yeah.
You look at scenes like this, where they've won 6 titles in 10 years, and you think, wow, how did we get here based on where we were literally 15 years ago? Because I'll be honest, there was a time, I think it's 2006, or maybe 2007, we didn't score a goal at home for 4 months in the league. Like, I'll be honest, I still can't look at it through the eyes of being a City fan just because I'm still on the field. Like, until someone can edit me out of that picture or out of that video, then it's not real, because I remember what it felt to be going up against that day.
Yeah. Hello, lovely people. Welcome to another episode of the Talk Your Talk podcast. As always, I'm your host, Nnamdi, and it's a pleasure to say that I'm joined by a man with over 400 career appearances spanning across the Premier League, the Championship, the MLS. He's the host of the Kickback of NEDUM podcast and the author of the new book, Kicking Back, released last week. And also our first ever Nigerian guest, Mr. NEDUM ONUOHA. NEDUM, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm very good, man. I'm very good. I appreciate that. Saying the full name is nice. And it rolled off your tongue very nicely there as well.
You know what? I know you've done a couple of these, so I was thinking, what's the best way to introduce you in a way that you haven't done before? And I don't think someone has said your name properly. So.
Of course not. Of course not. Most people see that and they run away from it. But, in true Nigerian fashion, you saw it and you ran straight into it. So, yeah, I appreciate that, man.
Yeah. Are you Igbo, by the way?
I am indeed, yeah.
Yeah. You actually that same pathway as my mum. My mum's a Mank as well, a Nigerian Mank as well, before she moved. She's from Disbury.
Yeah. It's not too far from me at all, yeah. That's good. Yeah. She sounds like a good woman to me.
Yeah, she was actually buzzing when I told you about this interview. She said, make sure you bring up Manchester. Make sure you ask him where he's from.
Yeah, man. This is home. This is
Yeah.
This is good.
Yeah. But that should be a great one today. Please do like and subscribe and have a great chat with them today, and hopefully ask some questions that you've not been asked before, and maybe some questions that you may have been asked before, but we'll
it's all good. It's all good.
But yeah, before we start, so we'll have some icebreaker questions. I know in previous interviews that you said that you don't really like recalling goals that you scored before. And the first question I'm going to do is ask you to recall some goals that you scored before. So out of your 15 career goals, what was your favorite?
My favorite, probably my first. It was against Spurs in 2008, I think it was.
Yeah.
I started playing in 2004, and I'll be honest, I never thought I was going to score a goal because it'd been 3 seasons. So to get that sort of monkey off my back was incredible. Because for the first 2 years, I thought I'm going to score. I've got celebrations planned, and then the moment you give up belief, you score the goal, and then I didn't know what to do, so I just ran away, just like blowing kisses to my mum in the stands. So I'd probably say that one. But then also, I think it's 15 goals or whatever, but there are a couple for England as well. And this is really weird. This might sound really weird to you, but I used to wonder whether people like Messi and Ronaldo would remember all the goals they scored because they scored hundreds. Speaking to people who'd scored hundreds, they remember every single one of them. So then me, somebody who scored less than 20, I don't remember all of mine. And there's a picture in the book of me celebrating a goal for England under 21s, and I don't remember what happened. I have no idea, no recollection of scoring the goal, but it was in the semi-final of the European Championship, so it was clearly significant.
When you saw the picture, did it maybe spark a memory at all, or was it?
Nah, genuinely didn't. Like, I'm rocked because the biggest thing in that game was the fact in my mind was that we were 3-0 at half time, then the game went to penalties and we're down to 10 men.
Yeah.
So I remember just the stress of thinking I'd have to take a penalty in a European Championship semi-final. Thankfully, it never got to me. But that sort of stress there, it meant that I kind of just forgot all the goals. I genuinely don't remember any goals scored in that game, and especially not me scoring one either.
That's unreal. I would not have thought that actually, but I guess the Spurs one must have stuck out for you.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So my second question you lived in the UK and the US as well, and Nigeria as well. Out of the three, what was your favorite? My
favorite. So I loved living in the USA. That was a lot of fun. Manchester's still very much home. I came here from Nigeria when I was 5-6 years old, and as it stands, I've not been back to Nigeria yet. But with the Nigerian culture, you always call Nigeria home.
Yeah,
you know, wherever you are, it's still home. Even if if I went back, it's unfamiliar because I've not been there in 30 years, but it's still home.
Yeah,
because there are more people like me there than anywhere else on the planet. So you know, in terms of a favorite, like, as I say, I've not been there and I've not really felt the energy around it, but there are more people I know and care about who are from there than, so as a consequence, like, that has to be my favorite. But in terms of just living on a day-to-day basis, it's Manchester, but from an emotional standpoint, it has to be Nigeria.
And I feel like, especially with Nigeria's like tradition and culture, wherever you are in the world, it kind of follows you. Like you're always going to bump into Nigerian wherever you are. And
there's a lot of us.
Yeah, there's a lot, and I think we've got like those like same sort of like life skills where it's, you know, I mean, reading your story as well, your mum is exactly like same as my mum was. Like, hey, you can go play football, but you're gonna go study. You're gonna go open your book and that sort of thing. So
facts, exactly.
Must be brilliant. And then final question is, other than football and the media duties that you obviously have, what's your favorite thing to do?
Outside of those two things, I think I'm very privileged to have played football and, you know, made decent money whilst doing it. And the only thing I really spend my money on is experiences. So I've loved traveling the world.
Yeah.
You know, I've been to a lot of countries, been to a lot of cities, and I love it because within football, you get a chance to meet lots of people from different countries and and you pick up a lot of different cultures and things like this.
Yeah.
And you think, oh, that's cool. I wonder what that place is like. And I'm very privileged to be able to go to some of those. Like, I just came back from Italy at the weekend.
Okay.
So travel, like, just getting the chance to travel the world and see it for what it is, instead of just thinking you have to be confined to wherever you are right now. And obviously I know lots of people can't afford to do it, but I'm lucky to be able to, and that's my big driving force. And I'd rather do that than, say, buy a car or buy some jewelry, because the experience will last longer than those two things, in my opinion.
Yeah. When you say you enjoy traveling, how different is it traveling post-retirement, having all that time, compared to traveling maybe for an away game or traveling to America when you play? How different is it?
Yeah, it's completely different, because when you travel in England for football, you basically arrive the evening before a game, wake up, have breakfast, have some food before the game, play the game, then go home. In the USA, like, if you're going from, say, West Coast to East Coast, you end up spending maybe 3 days there. So you get a better feel for the cities, because you can walk around, you've got meals which you don't have to have with the team and so on. So it's a different experience. But then in retirement, it's like, the biggest thing is I've got 3 kids, so managing what they're doing and traveling with them and so on. But ultimately, to understand that you can go anywhere, like, that's I'm personally not restricted by time, because I don't have a regular 9-to-5 type job. So, you know, I can make plans. I can think, oh, maybe I want to do this then, maybe I want to do that then, or even in some ways, if we can be spontaneous, to say, let's go here at this time. Whereas with football, there's nothing that's spontaneous, because ultimately you're just driven by the schedule all the time. And that's whether you're in and playing or whether you're getting ready for a pre-season or whatever. So yeah, in retirement, there is a lot more freedom and flexibility, but then also 3 kids are there as well. So that definitely plays into it.
And I know you've spoken previously as well about how when you retired, I think one of the main points for you was that football became a thing where you enjoyed more time with the family than being on the pitch, sort of thing. So when you're saying about traveling and like the excitement that brings and the freedom of now being able to obviously just see like your kids grow and not have some of the ties and media ties that you might have, how different has that been then?
No, it's been absolutely incredible, because, you know, as I say, when you're playing, your schedule's given to you. It's given to you on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. This is where you have to be. This is what you have to do. This is what we're going to do. And this is the standard that you have to achieve. But some days, like, you know, I won't lie, so I do keep fit and so on and play football and all that, but I could wake up one day knowing I've got football or some running to do in the evening, and I look out the window, see it raining, and be like, nah, not today. I'll just stay inside and do whatever. Whereas from, you know, when you're playing football, obviously it's a brilliant job, but you don't have the choice. It could be raining, snowing, rain's coming in sideways, could be a hurricane, but if they say you're out there on the field, you're out there on the field. So that's that sense of freedom. And then the chance to do it with them, like every morning, the kids come into mine and my wife's room, and, you know, they're smiling, they're happy, they want to give you hugs and all that. And I don't have to say where I'm leaving, because I've got to go to work and I'll be back later. Like, I see them, I'll do the drop-offs, I'll do the pickups whenever. We'll go, or where do you want to go tonight? Do you want to take them to tennis? Should we do this? Should we take them swimming? Should we do all this stuff? Like, and I love it. Some people hate it because they're obsessed with football, and that's fair enough. But for me, I was never, in the late years anyway, obsessed. The moment I had one child, I knew that was more important than anything I was doing career-wise. So to have 3 now, I think it speaks for itself.
Yeah, brilliant. So we'll start with the first question. I'm gonna start obviously at the very beginning. You've spoken already about how you're born Nigerian, you moved here when you were 5-6 years old, and obviously regarding your book, you reference in your book how like your story is more than you being just a footballer, but of a black man who spent your life where there was very few faces like your own. What were those early days like moving to Manchester, maybe not seeing as many familiar faces and trying to settle in, that sort of thing? How difficult was that?
Yeah, I think it was difficult, but in some ways it was probably easier than say other people experienced, just because we were so young. Because like I look at my eldest daughter now, and she's 8 years old, and I think about the last 2-3 years of her life, and even though she's big to me, she's still young in the grand scheme of life. So the changes and stuff that she was going through, from moving around, from say being in London when I was at QPR to being in America to now being back in Manchester, like she's gone through some stuff. But for me to go through a different country altogether, and to be there with my family, which was obviously the most important thing, like you have to adapt, but it's completely different weather. I think my mum and dad just said like the first time I went to school I was in about 3-4 jumpers, and this is in September, so in the grand scheme of things it's quite mild for the UK. But making those adjustments and not seeing those familiar faces anymore, I'm sure at the time it would have been tough for me. But then in the same breath, like I've realized now as I'm older that home is wherever your family are. So wherever my family go, like, you know what I mean? This is where it is. We could be in Manchester, could be in Monaco, could be in, I don't know, Madagascar or whatever. But if my family are there, then I feel at home. So I think that was the key thing. But in terms of learning how to be a part of a new culture, I think that was the hardest bit. But in the same breath, having to do it from a younger age is probably easier. But yeah, the difference in faces and stuff, it's different. Like our culture was different, for all the Nigerians and stuff who were listening. Like I was still having a bath with the bucket and the bowl, you know what I mean? Until I was like 10, 11 years old, even though that was in a bathtub, I we didn't use a shower as such for years. So even though we were in Manchester, the culture wasn't a Mancunian culture. We weren't going to the pub on a Friday or whatever. We weren't having fish and chips. There was none of that. It's just, this is what we were doing. This is who we were. And I think in time, we learned to sort of mix into that culture a bit more. But it's not necessarily to say we're totally welcomed by everybody, because we weren't then, even to this day, we're not now, but we get it. And now, like, I feel pride, like I'm from Manchester, I get it, I understand the culture. Obviously I don't fit in with everyone, but I understand the vibe of the city, and overall it's a good one for sure.
I agree with that 100%. I think you take the boy out of Nigeria, but you could never take Nigeria out of the boy, I think.
It's a fact.
And I think that's the thing that a lot of Nigerians can relate with. I mean, when your friends eating fish and chips and you've got a bowl of jollof rice there. But
that jollof rice hits different, by the way. And let me be clear. So because I've been able to travel the world, I've tasted loads of cuisines and stuff, and I always go through this thing where in my mind I think, oh yeah, I love a bit Japanese, I love a bit of like Mexican, I love some Spanish food, I love some English food and all this stuff. And people ask me what's my favorite, and I'm thinking those. But then the moment you smell home food and you taste that home food, that you reset. It's like that's the reset button. You remember, because you remember the feelings of that being served to you by your family, being in the environments with those people like yourself, and the sort of warmth that you'd feel from eating that type of food. Like that's you, that's who you are. The other stuff tastes great, but like home cooked food by my mom and things like that, like it's unforgettable times. Cannot beat it. You're right.
Well said. Put it better than I could ever. But obviously as well, you're a very, very unique and interesting case, especially compared to the modern day footballers. Obviously you achieved great GCSE grades, A-level grades, and graduated from Manchester Met as well. How difficult was it to study part-time as well while playing in your early days?
If we talk about the early days of me being a professional, like the way I started football, like when I made my debut at 17, and it was kind of unexpected because I was just playing for the reserves, and at the time playing for the reserves and doing school was just like, fine, it is what it is. Because you can play reserves from a young age. But then all of a sudden when you're doing it for the first team, and you're traveling around more, going to different places, having to invest more time into it, because each game matters just that bit more than a reserve game does. Then it wasn't tricky as such, but I wasn't just going to completely stop, because I was halfway through my A-levels anyway. And again, like a question which I think is a good question to ask, is like, when do you think you've made it? When do you think you're going to have a career in football? Is it after you make your debut, or is it after you've played 50 games, 100 games, played 2 seasons, 3 seasons? And for me, I was never really comfortable with knowing that this is what the rest of my life was going to be like until I'd done it for a couple of years. So the education side of things was still going, because I had such a level up, because I made my debut And then I remember watching Sky Sports News saying I was going to play the next game. And then the next game came and I was left out of the squad. So that's what it's like, the sort of the grounding that you kind of need at the start to say, just because you've had a taste doesn't mean you get to finish the whole dish. So so the educational side of things, it was always important from when I was in school, and it remained the case. I was still doing it, and I had time, because football is one of those things, like, if you take it for what it is, you know, you have to behave in a certain manner in terms of what you eat, how you behave, and so on. But you get a lot of free time as well. And as long as you don't mismanage it, you'd be fine. Because some people's minds were blown by the fact I was doing homework in the afternoon. But then you could ask them, like, what are they doing? And they'll say they're just napping.
So, and the book says about your ex-players were in the canteen while you were there studying.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not that deep. Like, it's a profession where you have to look after yourself, but you still also have a lot of free time, because I've seen it firsthand. A lot of players, like, they'll work hard before training, work hard in training, do stuff after training. But then that next period of time, they're sleeping, they're playing video games, they're just recovering. But for me, like, you know, that's physically taxing, but I'd rather do the mental stuff as well. And I'd be whipping the books out and do what I needed to do, because that deadline's just like everyone else in college.
How was it? Who was it actually, especially, that kind of instilled that mentality in you? In that, because obviously a lot of football's quite an all-consuming game. So when you're involved in it, especially in the career as well, it's a very short career. In that mindset, it's probably thinking, I need to play now. Who was it that helped you think ahead, maybe after football, and and put that ground that you have now?
It's my parents. My parents are both very well educated, and they're very driven from that standpoint. You know, ridiculously overqualified for the jobs and stuff that they were doing, and they knew that, you know, I was good at what I was doing. I was good at football. I was good at athletics, all that jazz, and they were very proud of me for that. But, like, at the end of the day, so what? Like, you can lean into it and say this is what you're going to do, but you can't have a dream of just doing that, because for most people it ends up being a nightmare. The vast majority of people do not make it. So even when you're doing well, you need a lot of good fortune to be able to be great, like not being injured at key times, you know, playing well at key times, somebody liking you that's in power. Because if somebody doesn't like you, you know, you've got no chance to prosper. With all that being said, the one thing that you can control is your output when it comes to your education. You can listen to your teachers, and you can try and take stuff on board so that when you do an examination, you can do well in the exam. Not everything, the exams we do, they're not impossible, but just require you to sort of buy in to a certain extent and hope that, you know, you do the best that you can. And I think they were very good at making sure the best that you can was actually the best, as opposed to saying, oh, you know, I tried my best. There's a difference between saying you tried your best and actually doing your best. They made sure that myself and my sisters, we were always doing our best. And with that being said, if we weren't, then some of the things which we loved doing and which we were good at, like my sisters with netball and so on, and myself with football, wouldn't it just, like, they'd say we can't go. And being in a Nigerian household, what are you going to say next? The answer is nothing. Like, you just the books are over there, off you go, and you go and do it, and you do it better. That's it, because that's home. That's what it's like to be us. Couldn't agree more, honestly. So we'll fast forward now. So obviously 188 Prem appearances, 116 Man City appearances for you, and I feel that you, and like we said before, I think you and a group of other people, especially Mika Richards, Richard Dunn, Joe Hart, especially those sort of players, I think you that group kind of resembles a Man City that a lot of younger fans won't know a lot about. And you coming through as well. So I feel like, I think it's very important to obviously acknowledge people like you and that era of Man City before we got to this Man City, and also to ask you, what was it like being a staple point in that team and overseeing the changes in 2008 and that sort of thing? It was, so the history of the club, like, you know, there's some people who hate Man City, and that's fair enough. But for the people who've had a vested interest in it, who support the club, like, you look at scenes like this where they've won 6 titles in 10 years, and you think, wow, how do we get here based on where we were literally 15 years ago? Because I'll be honest, there was a time, I think it's 2006 or maybe 2007, we didn't score a goal at home for 4 months in the league. Like, that's us in the Premier League as Man City. But these days, if City don't score a goal in one game, it's like perceived to be a crisis.
I think the game that rings out for everyone is I think it's the Middlesbrough game. I think that's the one everyone refers to.
Like, it's mad, but the club, it still maintains some of that identity, because I was lucky enough to do some stuff for them yesterday around the trophy celebration and the like. And there's so many people who are still there, staff-wise, who were there from back then. So the club went from being in Main Road and having the old stadium, and having maybe 70 to 100 full-time staff, to now having 1,000 across tons of different departments. But it makes sense, because that's been the growth that they've had, and it wasn't like they just hired 900 people one summer. it's been little by little making sure every department is getting better and better and better, making sure the stuff on the field is getting better and better and better. And I saw that because at the time for City, we we didn't have money. They were investing in sort of like older players and then mixing it with like really young academy players as well. The ambition was, can we finish in the top 10 maybe, all this stuff. But the mix was whatever it was. But the identity of the fan base was there. The identity of the fan base is still here to this day. And even though they've won 6 out of 10, they're still nervous that something can go wrong. Realistically, proven the last 10 years, things don't really go wrong. But I was from the era where things went wrong quite often. Yeah. And it wasn't enjoyable, but it wasn't enjoyable in terms of result standpoint, but people knew what the club was. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, as a consequence, people didn't hate City. Like United probably hated City, but they probably hated City in the same way a big brother hates a little brother. Just in a like go away sort of way. Yeah. But it was good to play for. There were some really good people who I played with, some good people who I worked with. Fans were fantastic. And those fans are still here, and lots of those people are still here as well. Yeah. So even though the success has changed, it's still very much Manchester City as opposed to the one which people perceive it to be from the outside.
I know you just mentioned about people within the area and that have loved the club for a long time know what the club is. Yeah. What is the club to you? What does the club mean to you? From making your debut in 2004 against Arsenal to leaving in 2012, 2011. Yeah. So what does the club mean to you?
Yeah, it means I try and be like a really analytical and logical person. I really try to be, but I lose my mind sometimes when it comes down to football because it matters. Like when they were 2-0 down on against Villa, I'm silent. But then they score the first, I'm shouting, come on. They score the second, and I'm like, let's go. And they shout the third, and I'm jumping up and down. Yeah. But that's not me. Like I'm supposed to be the calm one. And I pretend to be calm, but this is the thing about football. Like football makes us crazy, makes us do things which you just would never do on a day-to-day basis. Like you're not going to be that excited when you see a pair of trainers you like or whatever in Foot Locker. You're not going to see that. You're not going to do that when the school bell goes early or something like. But for football, it's different. You feel a real connection to it. It's part of your identity. Yeah. And I think that's what City is to people who really get behind them, because you buy into something. Like I remember when I first came to the country, I was doing like some of the City in the community schemes with a guy called Alex Williams, who used to be a goalkeeper for the club. And now I'm a trustee for City in the community. Yeah. You know what I mean? And he's still there. But I remember being a part of that. I remember the pride I felt when I was playing in the academy and I was wearing the same shirt as those guys who I'm watching in the stadium. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, from when you buy it and you see it and you feel it, like it's not a feeling you'd ever wish to lose. And that goes all across the board for fans, like true fans all across, football in general. Like I'm sure it's the same for yourself and Arsenal. Like even through the pain, you come back. Yeah. Like why did you come back? Supporting a football team is one of the worst decisions anyone could ever do. But then also it's probably the biggest part of someone's identity as well. Yeah. So I felt that. I was very fortunate to have been a ball boy, to have played for the academy, to have played for the first team, to then retire and be able to watch them as a fan as such, and to know people within it and to be invited back. Like that's what makes me proud. Of course, yeah. The amount of stuff I've done I did during my time means that when these moments come for them, even though it feels like a different club, they still invite me back with open arms. Yeah. And the fans, the staff, like even some of the players who are here now, they remember me. Yeah. And that's like, I feel immensely proud about that. So the club itself, I can't say it means everything to me because I'm always family first, but representing the club and being a part of it, that's a big part of who I am. Yeah. And to be honest, as I say, it makes no sense, but in the same breath, I kind of love it. Yeah. I think that your story is probably it's one of those traditional football stories where, you come entrenched in the club like you did. You moved to the area, you're a ball boy, played 200 odd times, 100 and something odd times for the club, then get invited back to be on the board of trustees last October. I think it's the any football fan would love a life that you lived. And I think that's why it's no surprise. I mean, you see the Gundogan goal going on Sunday, and you're completely. You can't help but be a part of the saying they give here is like, once a blue, always a blue. Yeah. And I totally understand it, because once that thing is inside your mind, like it's very hard to get rid of. Yeah. No, 100% agree. I wish Arsenal could do the same, but
but
still you come back though. That's the thing. Still you come back.
Still here every season. I'll always be here. But there you go. Of course. Now, obviously, within the City, your City tenure, there was a huge moment. And I know you've spoken about it countless times, so I'm not going to ask about it. I'm actually going to ask about something that, again, during that same season, on that same afternoon, actually the week before, there was a huge goal from Djibril Cissé against Stoke.
Yes.
That was probably even more for you and your team at the time, was even more monumental than what happened obviously the week after. So what was that moment like? And then obviously going on to the week after, how did it feel being City fan, City ex-player, knowing that your team was safe at the end of the day? How was that day?
So while I was QPR in 2012, the second half of the season, 2012, like, everybody loves football, but you love it when you're winning. Nobody loves it when you're losing. Yeah. So being in an environment where you've got a ton of people essentially being paid to win that are constantly losing, there's a lot of unhappy faces, you know, stress from management to players to staff in general. Like, the mood's down. Like, when you come in on a Monday after losing on a Saturday, like, you can't just be all buoyant and positive, because it's like you don't care, but you always care, but you've got to get ready for the next thing. From when I signed in that January, we were really bad away from home and we were scrambling. Then before you know it, I think we won like 4 or 5 home games in a row. And that goal from Djibril Cissé was in the last minute of the game from a corner, I think it was. And it turns out those were the 3 points that kept us up. Those are the 3 points that meant, you know, to go back a bit, that meant that when we were headed to City, we were above the line, we were above the relegation line. And we didn't have to go to City to win, to stay up, or to have a chance of staying up.
I think you just needed a positive result or something.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's a privileged position to be in, because Bolton would have like ripped our arm off to have such a thing. So that goal was incredible. I remember the noise in the stadium at the time when that happened. It's like, oh my God, this is amazing. And now we've got a chance. So then to go back to City, like, that's my first time playing against City. I'd never done it. You know, think about it. All the things I've done in my life to that point, I'd never played against City. That was one which I'd never done. I'd never been to the away dressing room in that stadium. I'd never like gone out on the field and played against some of my friends, because the QPR people, they were my teammates, because I'd not been there long enough to call them my friends. But the City guys, because I've been there for so long, these are my friends. They were friends in the field and the staff, like
mates, of course,
security, everything. So it was really weird, really surreal, and for it to be such a high stakes game was mad. And I'll be honest, like, you know, I wanted City to win the league, but I didn't want them to win the league on Sunday at that game on my expense. No chance on planet Earth. Because, think of it this way: you can support a football club, but when the football club tell you that they don't want you anymore, and you've got to go, the love for them is not going to be as high as say it would be if you were still there. So I was off them. Like, I wanted my friends to do well, but I didn't love the manager. I didn't love some of the people and the board and all that jazz. But in the end, everything worked out great. But when I speak to City fans today and we talk about City winning leagues and so on, they say, did you enjoy 2012? And I say no. And I think it's the only time I won a league title where I didn't. Sometimes there was something where I didn't, because, like, firstly, my team lost. And also I had a bit of resentment for certain figures at the club at the time. So their joy coming off the back of me leaving wasn't like, oh, let me celebrate with you. Like, in the end, I went to the dressing room to congratulate some of the people in there, but it certainly wasn't that. And the whole objective for that game for me was to stay up. So thankfully we managed to do that, and it became one of the most iconic games in Premier League history.
A decade on, obviously now, so knowing that you'd left the pitch and Bolton had gone down, and so you were saved, and obviously and I think the feelings that you had towards the club were valid at the time, obviously, especially with the way Mancini, you've spoken about how Mancini treated you during your exit. How was it now, a decade on, looking back at that goal, of course, and now taking off your QPR for a second and being the City fan at heart? How do you look back at that Aguero goal now?
I'll be honest, I still can't look at it through the eyes of being a City fan, just because I'm still on the field. Like, until someone can edit me out of that picture or that video, then it's not real, because I remember what it felt to be going up against that day. And it was very stressful. And I think myself and a few others, we don't really watch that game back. You know, we might talk about the moment, but it's really, really stressful to watch back because you immediately get taken to the point of feeling the discomfort that you felt being involved in some of the goals, and like knowing that, like, from the QPR standpoint, we celebrated once the game was over and we knew. It meant, so for 90 something minutes, there was nothing that was enjoyable. Like, you know, sometimes with football, you can look back at like a 5-10 minutes where you're moving the ball nicely. There's this goal, there's that goal, there's this, there's that. But the game for us, if we watched it back, it's just us. It's like us going a goal down, us being 2-1 up, having going down to 10 men, and then just being attacked constantly.
It was relentless that day.
Like what?
It really was.
What's the joy? What's the joy in that? You know what I mean? And then the thing for us from a QPR standpoint is like we lost, so I can't take my head off the fact. I can't just put my blue hat on and say, you know, City is great that we won, because I can't say I won the game. Like recently, I was invited to go to like the 93-20 event that City had. And I thought that's really cool that they invite me. But then all the guys who were on stage, they're all City guys like Gareth Barry, Nigel de Jongs, Michael Richards, Jordan Lescott's, all people like that. But I can't sit next to them because they won the game. I lost the game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What? If someone asked me a question, what am I going to say? Oh yeah, it felt great.
And I think watching the old interviews, especially when people had asked you about this before, and I know loads of people asked you this question, but I think a lot of people have forgotten the fact that you were on the pitch that day. You had the best seat in the house to watch the game, but you weren't wearing a blue top. And
no, not at all.
Yeah,
not at all. Like when that goal goes in to make it 3-2, I'm thinking I've been relegated in my old stadium by the manager who I didn't like at the time. That's not joy. That's not even close to joy. So whereas for the other successes, you know, I might have jumped up and celebrated like I did on the weekend when they scored to make it 3-2. I'm not jumping up celebrating then. Like I'm crushed. I'm literally crushed, and I'm not going to be revisionist now and see it again and jump up and celebrate, because I remember how I felt in that moment. I remember how my teammates felt in that moment, and it's not something worth celebrating. I'll tell you that for a fact.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything anyone would want to relive. But so I won't twist the knife anymore.
Yeah, appreciate it, man.
Yeah, but so obviously, after 6 years at QPR, you made the very brave and courageous move to America, take your talents to America, to Utah. So first of all, what was the transition like for you, the playing style, moving your family to America, and also how difficult was it, obviously experiencing America at the time you did with the height of the BLM protest? I know you've spoken about that at length before.
So the vision was to move abroad, and then this is when I left QPR in 2018. And I was a good age to be doing that. My kids were a good age as well.
Yeah.
And because they were young enough to uproot them and it not to really affect them, because they're not missing out on tons of friendships and stuff like that. So the plan was to do it. Then I had the idea to go to America. And once that was in my head, I couldn't get it out of my mind. When the opportunity came to go there, I was excited because it's a new culture and I love that feeling. Like I told you, I love traveling the world. Yeah. So now I could do that, because in the 2 years I spent there, I was going to cities and states in America, which I never would have gone to on holiday, not because they're bad states or anything, but because you don't have time to see them all. But now I was traveling and I was getting the chance to see them all, and I understood a whole new country, understood what it was like to live there, you know, because we traveled on holiday to places, but you don't really live the life.
Yeah.
But living the life was interesting. Like I lived at the base of a mountain range. My eldest daughter, when she finished school, she traveled 15 minutes and she's skiing down mountains and stuff like this. I live in Manchester, you know, that you can't see any hills. You know what I mean? Still here I was living at 5,000 feet above sea level and traveling up to like 10,000 feet and just like looking out across like 50, 60, 70 miles and stuff like this. So it was amazing. And from the lifestyle thing for the first few years was incredible, because now you're a 45-minute flight away from Las Vegas. You're an hour and a half flight away from California. You could fly 3 hours and be in like towards New York, 4 hours be in Florida, sort of thing, 2 hours Atlanta. Like it was incredible to just be part of that culture. But then the football side of things as well. You come over, and to be honest, most people in the MLS, they don't really watch the Premier League like that. Like they might watch the big games, so they don't know who you are. No, it's genuine. Like they know the big names, but they don't know everyone because they buy into their own thing. Like that's why lots of people don't leave the MLS, because they think that's in the same way we think about the Premier League. Some of those guys think the same about the MLS. Like they've got no interest in anything else. So a lot of the audience that, for example, in America that watches the Premier League, they don't watch the MLS. So the same is also true from the other side. So going over, you got to prove yourself, and then you know it's football, it's fine, I can do that. And then what I enjoyed the most was there was a game, I think I said this in the book, we were playing against Vancouver, and the guy was running at me. I didn't know whether he was right-footed, left-footed, strong, fast, anything like that. And I liked it because it took me back to when I was 17 making my debut, and you're playing against people for the very first time. And it makes you do things in a different manner, because to sort of put you behind the curtain, when you play in the Premier League, the Championship, and so on, you do it for many years. The people you play against year to year, they're exactly the same. They all have the same tendencies. So you know what type of game you're going to have.
Yeah.
You know, there can be margins whereby somebody will score a goal or do something magical, but people tend to behave and play in the same way.
Yeah,
so do you get as much joy when you're in year 8, year 10 of your career and you're playing against someone for literally like the 16th time? You know, it doesn't quite hit the same.
Yeah.
So especially if you're not winning all the time. So like, and I learned in time, like Jermaine Defoe runs down the left wing, comes inside onto his right foot and then tries to kick it through your legs to the goalkeeper's bottom right. You know, these are things that you pick up over time. But now everywhere I went, every team I played, I was playing against them for the first time. I was traveling to this state for the first time, this stadium for the first time, playing against this player for the first time. And that's really exciting, rejuvenating. It sort of brings you back to a point which you don't really feel when you're in your 30s.
Yeah.
I had it, loved it, played well, respected by my teammates on and off the field. That was incredible. But then also 2020 came with the pandemic, with the social unrest, with the elections as well that year. Like, then that became like a really wild experience because you got to see some of the more negative side of things in relation to America. And it has a ton of positives, but the negatives can be very, very loud. And I think in that time, nobody was allowed to fly over to the US as well. So it's just me, my wife, and my kids. And, you know, that is my family. But then we felt a long way from home because for all those people back home, they had each other at a time when they probably needed each other more than ever. But for us, we were basically isolated. So that was a shame. But everyone went through something, and to be honest, the biggest thing is still being here in 2022.
Yeah. I think that the time that you were over there, and obviously experiencing what you experienced at the time, I think being able to see both sides of America, the good and the bad, and the very bad, obviously during that time as well. Because obviously it must have stretched. I think sport in general got stretched at that time. A lot of uncomfortable conversations had to be had. You know, some from office conversations to changing room conversations, that sort of thing. How difficult was that for you to stretch your role as a sports person? And I mean, you've been that for a while, actually, you know, from the education you had and the upbringing you had. How difficult was it for you to be? I'm more than footballer now. I can actually use my voice to speak about certain things.
So today I use my voice an awful lot. Like literally I'm in broadcasting, so I do use it. But from at that point, it was probably easier for me because I had the leverage and I had nothing to lose. Yeah. Like if they wanted to get rid of me, fine, I'll leave, I'll go home, but I'm going to stand for something which I believe in. Yeah. And because I was one of the senior players, like the timing of it was great because it was a young squad. So we could talk about things and I could listen to people talk about both sides of things. Like the irony behind it all, say when we were in America in the MLS, like we'd be kneeling and everyone across the line, not everyone was from the same political party, they didn't have the same beliefs, but they all believed in the same thing, that Black Lives Matter. Yeah. So 11 players kneeling, Black Lives Matter, but then we're still being heckled by certain parts of the crowd and so on because they're accusing us of being something that we're not. Yeah. And that's tough at that point, especially because me being the neutral, you know, you learn about America and you learn about what the Constitution stands for, and then you learn that the right to peaceful protest is literally part of the First Amendment, and kneeling is exactly that. Yeah. So when somebody who claims to be a constitutionalist says you shouldn't be kneeling because you're a disgrace to the country, well, how can I be a disgrace to the country when I'm acting according to the makeup of the country itself? Yeah. You know, but that's the way certain things go, because there are a lot of like arguments done in bad faith and people just offering red meat to people to make it seem like you're trying to destroy their country, destroy their beliefs and their worldview. But it's the nature of it. And I learned a lot in that time, learned a lot about my peers, learned a lot about the country itself. Not, as I say, it's not all bad, it's not all good. Like, you just learn about it all. And I think it helped me being neutral, helped me not being able to vote, because I could just see everything for what it was, and not just have to dive down an echo chamber and say, this is my team and this is how I'm going to see the world. I just saw it for what it was, and it certainly was something which I won't forget. Yeah, definitely. And on a lighter note, obviously, during your time in America, on top of all the things you experienced, you had a experience with a certain Zlatan Ibrahimovic. That I did, yeah. That I did. You say that's a lighter note. I'm not sure about that. It's a big fella, man. It's a big fella.
That one there. I think during that situation as well, I remember that when that happened actually, and obviously that was like kind of like memed it around and it went around social media and that sort of thing. But there wasn't really any I think you did an interview just after it saying about like he threatened you essentially and what he said and stuff like that. But obviously now, a good couple of years after that, what are your feelings towards that interaction and towards him?
I still would have done the exact same thing. And to be honest, in terms of my time in the US, it was quite a significant one for me because, like, Ibrahimovic is obviously a fantastic player and his record speaks for itself, but some of the stuff which he says and the way he acts sometimes doesn't necessarily get the support that his sort of like status does.
Yeah.
But in the US, because they're kind of driven more so by the stars as opposed to the teams, because let's be honest, like a team, there are a few teams over there who are probably less than 5 years old, you know, but here we are in England and around the world, you're talking about teams who are over 100 years old, you know what I mean? So when a team's that new, then you kind of want to draw attention to them according to their star power, because not everyone's going to care about the location, you know, so that stuff matters. And he was a big draw, probably one of, maybe he's the highest profile player to ever play in the MLS. You know, you've obviously got Beckham and the like, but you know, he has a very, very big audience. So it meant that he'd say a lot of stuff and do a lot of stuff and there'd never be any pushback. But I think that was the first time when there was a level of pushback, and there were people who'd speak to me in the coming weeks and months after from other teams who'd like give me a pat on the back. Saying, well done for doing that. Because sometimes, you know, I always end up being a voice for people who don't want to be heard, if you know what I mean. But just because you don't want to be heard doesn't mean you don't have something to say. You know, you're just scared in terms of how to say it because you don't have enough leverage to do it. So
especially against someone like him, where his ego
he's a big fella, but never in all my career did I see somebody from the opposition come into the other dressing room moments after a game's finished that team's lost and just try and like little boy somebody off. And I'm not there for it. Because he came in and says, have I calmed down yet? But I was thinking, I don't even know this guy. And if I did know him, he still wouldn't come to me. He wouldn't come like a minute after the game's finished. So it made a difference. But ironically, then the next time I played against him, he was actually really nice in the game. Like, it was really, really nice. And then we both ended up scoring in the game. Like, it shook hands and it was like fine. And I think in some ways it showed the difference between European football and American football to a certain extent, because he enjoyed somebody going up against him in that first game. But then he was also prepared to shake hands and move on. You know what I mean? So there was no real like drama and beef like that. We just made it as competitive as we could. And then like I did something good and he's like saying something nice. I thought, I came ready for war, thinking that's what it's about. But no, it's just being chill. And then in some ways, then you're thinking, well, he respects me as a player, which is something you can't say about all the players he came up against in that league. Wow, what an experience that must have been. For sure.
But obviously, again, obviously just before you retired as well, I owe you a personal thank you actually, because you launched the Kicking Back with NEDUM podcast, and personally, that was one of my favorites during lockdown. I was
appreciate that.
I was a really big listener, so especially some of my favorites. Actually, I'm a big Iwobi fan as well, so that Iwobi was great for me. So I wanted to ask you what your thinking was behind. I know you've spoken about how getting involved in the, I think, Real Salt Lake women's the team and that team. What was your thinking behind launching that podcast and what it became?
Well, I don't think it's that I love to talk, but I can talk for a long time. I enjoy conversations. I love learning things from people. Like, you know, if I'm the type where if I ask somebody how you doing, like I'm waiting for the answer, as opposed to just saying it and then moving on. So with that sort of thought behind it, the producer Ryan Hale, like he was somebody who says, you should try one. And to be fair, I never thought about trying one at that point, but I did used to listen to one all the time. Like I was a big Joe Budden podcast guy. So I used to batter those twice a week. I attack those head first. So when he said, do you fancy doing it? I said, I'll give it a go and whatever. And then we started doing it. Before you know it, like I was getting better. I was learning and I was enjoying it. I was enjoying listening to things and listening to people talk, and I was enjoying the feedback you'd be getting. When you understand the value, like people are reaching out to you, because it then turned out that it was such a big deal during the pandemic. And where I was in Utah, like the restrictions weren't as hard as say they were in other places. So I was able to have more things rolling for longer and so on. So I'm talking to people and you realize the value of it, and you realize that, say for me, even though I played, I'm a host on the show, and the show isn't for me. The show's for the people who come on. The show's for the people who listen. And when you provide a service of people like that, which they appreciate, like it's excitement. Like there's a lot of hard work, as you know yourself, that goes into it. But when somebody says, definitely. Like one of my favorite moments, and there've been a lot, was when Dedrick Boyata came on and he opened up about his time at Celtic and how he left. And then I think the next week there was somebody who was a Celtic fan who wrote to me to say thank you for putting this on. I had a different perception of what Dedrick was, but after listening to this, he will always be welcome back in Glasgow.
Wow.
And I thought, yeah, that's it. That's what it is, because now somebody knows what the truth is about a situation, as opposed to what they're being fed by people who maybe have an agenda against said individuals. Because as a player, like these days, you've got more of a platform, but I'd argue there are more platforms out there that are affecting you in a negative or positive manner than one
definitely
you can do yourself. So but
it's
that go on.
There's definitely like a bite-sized sort of social media era now, where I think people have got such a short attention span. They kind of want that extravagant headline, slams. I know you spoke about how I think there was a Glasgow Live headline of Dedrick Bielsa slams Brendan Rodgers, blah blah blah. And I think I can definitely see why players are, and I think that's why people like yourself are so valuable, because I can see why players are kind of hesitant to sometimes speak to the media. I'm a journalist myself, and so I think at the start of that Iwobi interview, I think I remember in the first minute you were kind of like coming down, be like, but this interview is about you. You know what I mean? And even him, he kind of sound kind of hesitant, but as it went on, he became more comfortable. And I can see why an interview like Dedrick Bielsa was so important. Yeah,
that's the thing, really. Like as a player, you understand that you have to do media, but then you're always concerned about how will this be perceived. So sometimes when you're concerned like that, you don't end up being yourself. You just end up being the type of person that's essentially gonna, at worst, like, would you rather get called boring or controversial? You know, boring keeps you in the team. Boring will keep you rolling forward. Controversial's like, you know, it's a dangerous place to be, because when you're controversial, you upset anyone, upset everyone. Like realities of it. Say, for example, how rare is it to hear a player, or a coach, or a football club say, like, you know, it's going to be a tough game at the week. To say that the game on the weekend is going to be easy, even though it could be the best team versus the worst team. It's always going to be a tough. You always find the positives, because you just don't want to have that against your name. But the reality of the situation is, there's a reason why a team's outstanding favourites and why they're at the top versus the reason why another team's at the bottom. And everyone knows how the game's going to go. But still, you talk about the team at the bottom like they're the best thing in the world. It's just the way it goes, you know what I mean? Because you don't want to find trouble. So in the end, you just say something that's probably quite boring. On the topic of you being quite outspoken, as you have been, obviously, so last week saw the release of the Kicking Back with NEDUM book. And obviously you said before that this is a book about identity, and who you are, obviously some stories about your parents and your family, your upbringing, your career, and just you off the pitch as much as on it. Tell me about the creation of the book, and also what can people find out from you in the book that they haven't heard on a podcast or an interview that you've done before? The creation of the book came where, for the last 18 months, I've been doing some stuff for the BBC. And one thing which they try and drill into as an ex-player is to say that, you know, it's good that you've got your niche, you've got your understanding, but share it, share your insight, share your stories, and really bring people stuff which they haven't heard before. Like, it's not in a controversial way, but, you know, within football, you get to a point where the stuff that you see on a day-to-day basis, you see it with the same people every day as well. So you just take it for granted and think that's the real world. Like, the example I give is, say when I was at QPR, there was a guy who was on the barrier on the way in, and he'd always let you in, see your car and so on. But he'd also be keeping a tally of what time you got in, so that if somebody was late, then you'd have to pay a fine and stuff like this, and see who's in first, who's out first. And obviously it's for like a security thing as well. But he'd always do that. But then I knew some people who'd always try and pay him off whenever they'd get there like 1 minute late or 2 minutes late. And that I wouldn't talk about that to just footballers. But then when you start saying it out to people who haven't played football, the next question is, which players were those? Before you know it, you're getting a different sort of feel. Because I know who it is, and the people at the training ground know who it is. So we don't talk about it. But before you know it, it's like, that's really interesting. And that's a story which comes from a place of something which you wouldn't share out in the open. But with the book, like myself and Hugh Ferris, the ghostwriter who taught me into doing it, before you know it, we were talking about my career, talking about football, talking about my identity, me as a person, but then the situations I've been in, the reason why I'm the person I am today. And you realize, I think I said this earlier, just because sometimes people don't speak doesn't mean they don't have anything to say. You know, and it's not about being outspoken, because within the book, I'm not being outspoken. In the book, I'm talking about the way that I see things, and there's nobody that's being slammed, and if they are being slammed as such, let me explain why.
Yeah.
Because that's why I do some of the media stuff that I do. And like this podcast, for example, it's not just about expressing an opinion, it's about explaining it as well.
Yeah.
Because then people may disagree with you about the opinion, but they understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing for me. And I think with this book, you'll understand exactly where I'm coming from when I talk about some of the like protagonists within my career and within football for the last 16 years at the places that I've been, because there are a lot of very familiar faces, some unfamiliar, but you know, being at City, when I was at City with the changes in ownership and so on, being at QPR where we were trying really hard to bring in some of the biggest stars, but then also failing at the same time. Like these are very, very strange times, but I think my depiction of it is fair.
Yeah.
And it's understanding that not everything is good, but then in the same breath also not everything is bad.
Yeah.
I think you'll learn a lot about that, learn a lot about me, and make a decision for yourself about whether you enjoy those times as much as say you thought you did.
Yeah, I think the only way you can do that is to do essentially what you've done really is post-retirement. I mean, you can see what there's in the papers, or obviously crowds, kind of build an ideology on a player off the smallest thing. But I mean, once you've listened to me speak or read my book, you can now got the full picture, then make your mind up,
Exactly. That's exactly right. And people will get snippets from the book and try and turn it into all this stuff. But like, I don't care. And the reality is, like, my voice represents a lot more players than the people who say something within it's not true. Yeah. And the people who I represent, like, if you find anybody that says this isn't true or that isn't true, it'll be one person. It'll never be two. Yeah. And the other people who are part of it they say nothing, and sometimes that silence says the most. Yeah. Because what they're choosing to do is, like we always do, and not everybody within football, not everybody within life likes to be heard. Yeah. But if there's something they agree with, they tend to say nothing. Yeah. So there we go.
I feel like you as a person, as a player, are an embodiment of a different era of sport in general, I think, because I think the message, obviously with the rise of social media and that sort of thing, there's always been like this like footballer code sort of thing, where it's like, there's things that happen on the pitch that we will see, things that said in press conferences, but there's things that happen in training grounds and meetings, contract negotiations that we'll never see. And I feel like people like you that are now, taking a bit more of a prominent, because I think the average football fan wants to hear that. They want to break the footballer code. They want to hear, okay, so what people are, myself, I had no idea that people were paying off the guy to come and
exactly.
So I think they're trying to break that third wall of, well, we want to hear that. And I think the same comparison could be made of Draymond Green, the basketball player in America. Yeah. He's got a podcast himself, and he's doing amazing. I think people like you are really breaking barriers for what fans.
Yeah, we're trying, because if you think about it realistically, it's obviously harder whilst you're playing, and what Draymond Green's doing is special. But it's the same way like JJ Redick was doing it when he was playing. I think he's really good. Brilliant. But I think if you're going to see people who played the game appear on TV, they need to be saying something that you don't already know. Yeah. Because otherwise, what's the point? You can have a whole say cliches, but like share those experiences, talk about those times. It doesn't have to be like playing for Man United or whatever. Like, understand that maybe it's the case of, as a player, not loving the tactics that the manager puts out, but understand as a player, the only way you can be successful and see if it will work out is if you all try and do it together anyway. Yeah. You know what I mean? I understand that it's about the collective, never about the individual. All these sorts of insights and stuff that you can share, how people feel getting ready for a game, like the importance of scheduling, like some people are superstitious. Yeah. Like it brings, for me, I think it brings fans more on board to what the game is really like, as opposed to some of the like dumb cliches which we throw out, and they're very easy to accept because nobody's pushing back against them. Like football is a lot more complex than we think. Yeah. And even like, say for the weekend, like City playing Liverpool, Liverpool playing Wolves, City playing Aston Villa. Like we think both things are a foregone conclusion, but the reality is, no matter how good a team is, the other 11 players are some of the best football players in the country. So they're going to be capable of beating whoever. They might not be as talented as you, but they have enough talent to be able to win a game. So here's the voice of people who enter games like that, who are being disrespected on a week-to-week basis. This football, there's a lot more to it than say, we just say, this was an easy game. This will be an easy game. That was an easy game. No, it's not. That's just lazy.
Yeah. Oh, listen, if you want to hear more of that, make sure you do get the Kicking Back with NEDUM book. I've got my copy on my Kindle, and I'll be talking to it after today. But brilliant. And before we end, we've got a quick fire round. So I want you to clear your mind, no thinking, 10 questions. and let's end this on a great note. Ready?
Go on, let's go.
So, obviously, you've been on the pitch for some fantastic footballing moments. Obviously, the Cisse goal, the Aguero goal, the playoff final. Which is your personal favorite?
Playoff final.
Yep.
Do you want an explanation or just a quick answer?
Oh, fire away. Give me an explanation.
So I was on a halfway line when Bobby Zamora scored that goal, and we weren't great in that game. We weren't great in that game at all. And he scored the goal. And my view was every single QPR fan. That's all I could see.
Yeah.
Like if he would have scored down at the Derby end, then it would look very different. But instead, it was like the perfect goal because I saw it slam right into the top corner, and just the disbelief because we weren't supposed to be winning that game yet. Still there we were. So that one for sure.
Yeah, brilliant. You said obviously in previous interviews that you were a striker early in your career. Did you prefer your days as a forward or as a defender?
That's just an easy question. Who wants to be a defender, man? Like, you know what I mean? You've got to be a striker all day long. As a striker, you can have a bad game, score a winner, and be the hero. As a defender, you can have a great game, mess up for 1 second, you're the villain. So striker all day.
I think definitely, especially for your career, I think especially with defender, you make a mistake and goalkeepers as well. You make a mistake, it's very hard to shake off that sort of.
What you need to check for is the next time your team, this is for everyone, next time your team's like conceding a goal, see which people are in the mix, because some of the people who like cause those mistakes, they never run back and that's why you never see them. Look out for the play when the keeper catches the ball, who he rolls it out to on the halfway line to start the next attack. Because there's a reason they're there, and it's because they didn't want to defend.
Which is why I didn't get. I know you said as well that you blamed yourself for that Aguero goal in a way.
It's because so that's the nuance of football. As a player, you always know when something's your fault. And I was the last QPR player to touch the ball. Just because you don't like fall over or someone beats you with a trick doesn't mean that you're not the reason why the other team started the attack, because it's little things that can make a big difference. So I knew that that came from a mistake that I made, and that's why it was devastating when they scored. But in the end, thankfully, it didn't matter.
So obviously as well, throughout your time in the Premier League, MLS and Championship, you played centre back and right back. Which player gave you the toughest time?
Which player? Do you know what? I'll relate something to QPR. Like there was a game where we beat them 3-2 after being 2-0 down at home. And it's annoying, that game, because I can't watch it back because I was terrible. Suarez literally just like was having his way. And I just thought it's annoying. It's really, really annoying because it's such an iconic game. But every time I watch back it's just horrible because it's just like not making me and all sorts. So I'd probably say him. And I'd say just because like Suarez is a great finisher, but he's like chaos. He tries to nutmeg you by kicking it off your heel and stuff like that. So how to defend against him, like prime Suarez, was a lot of hard work. So I'll say Suarez.
Do you prefer being the interviewee or the interviewer?
I think it depends. Like, I think you're a good host, so I'm enjoying speaking with you.
Thank you very much.
You know what I mean? You get a feel for things, but some of the ones that you do, you end up just having to just say the same answers to the same questions, and like you can't really. And the ones where an interviewer like gives the answer in the question, so you must have been happy then when the goal went. Well, it's either yes or no, you know what I mean? Instead of like, how do you feel and stuff. So I think I'd rather be interviewed, but by somebody who I can have a conversation with, because then that makes for a better show, I think. Which player from your Man City era do you think wouldn't look out of place in this current Man City team? I've got an idea who you might say. From people who were in my academy, I'd say Stevie Ireland, but then from like people who came in, I'd have to say like an Alano or Robinho, because they were nasty players, man. They were very good.
I'm surprised you didn't go for Sean Wright-Phillips. I thought he was going to go for Sean Wright-Phillips.
No, it's because like Sean's very good, and he was at Chelsea, successful, but he's more of like just a direct take it to your winger. And City, they don't really do that as far as I see it, especially not on that right side. And it needs, like Sean's incredible, whatever. I'm sure he could do very well, but like there's Alano and there's Robinho, and I think they definitely fit into this sort of style.
Who was your favorite player growing up?
At City, it would have been Anelka, but in general, it was actually Thierry Henry when he was at Arsenal. He was the dude, man. It's too smooth. It's too much.
I think he was all off. Did you ever play against him, by the way?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. It was at Highbury as well, which seems like weird. It seems like a weird thing to say because I'm only 35, but I'm talking about playing against Thierry Henry at Highbury and all that stuff. But it was unbelievable. I was playing right back in that game, and interestingly, I think it was Pires that was playing left wing and Ashley Cole playing left back. and there was a ball got played down the channel and Perez was in front of me. So I thought, oh, happy days. So I started running back towards it. And the next thing Thierry Henry had me squared up in the corner 1v1. I was like, yo, it's real. Like that. This is usually stuff I see on TV, but here I am now. It's incredible.
Who is your current favorite player in the current City team?
I would have to say Kevin De Bruyne, because everyone sees his quality. He's unbelievable, and I was lucky enough to be speaking to him yesterday, and it's a really nice guy as well. I was like, this guy's perfect, man. Like I can't be dealing with this. So I've got to say him.
No, what a player! Do you prefer podcasting or writing?
Podcasting all day long. Like with podcasting, you can have a show which you've got planned out in your head. But if the guest is good, then it doesn't have to go in that direction. Yeah. You know what I mean? It can turn into anything. And we all know, like, we listen to the sort of podcast we listen to, not because of the structure, but for the people on board and the stuff that's being said. Like, you might have a question but then obviously the other side of that coin is you could have a question for someone that might give you a one-word answer. Yeah. And then, you know what I mean? That's a disaster. But when you find the right groove, you find the right people. Like there'll be people listening to this who are loving every word that we're having together. You know what I mean? And I think that's the thing about podcasting, because with reading, it's good. You can have a story, but like nothing can change. But with this, it can go in any direction at all. And I think that's the beauty of podcasting, why people love it, especially from like listening from the outside, just to get a little bit of insight into what these guys are talking about.
100%. I feel like, especially with interviews, I think one thing I've learned is that you do your research, you get your interview, read your questions. But I think when you've got, and I was really excited for this interview because I've obviously seen your old interviews, and I've seen you plan an interview for an hour and it goes on for 2.5. And I think when you've got a person like that it could just flow and time can just pass.
That's that. I think that is it with podcasts. Like, some people get daunted when they see the length of a podcast, but when you just let it play, just listen, time just passes. It doesn't really matter like that anymore. Like, instead of I'm not trying to tell people to not buy my book, because I need to buy my book. But these are how many pages it is, and these are how many chapters it is. But with this, like, you start talking, you start listening, you're enjoying it or you're not. But if you're enjoying it, time doesn't matter. The only time it'll matter is if you arrive at your destination. You've got to stop listening to it. But I don't listen to him. Buy his book. Yes.
Penultimate question: who was the best player you ever played with?
I think in terms of the legacy standpoint, I think it's got to be Sergio Aguero. When he first came in, like, he was the dude and whatever, but he scored 250 odd goals for the club. That's mythical. So I think it has to be him.
And then finally, other than the Kickback with NEDUM, what is the best football podcast on the planet?
The best football podcast on the planet, I'd have to say Talk Your Talk. That has to be number one. And I think everyone listening would agree with that. Otherwise, it wouldn't be, would they?
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll end it there. NEDUM, it's honestly been a pleasure. Thank you for your time. Can we see a return of the Kickback with NEDUM podcast at any time?
Listen, anything is possible. That's the other beauty of podcasts. We can say it's done, but you never know, do you? You never know.
We'll be waiting. Everyone, like I said, go and buy the book. I'll put all the details in the description. And NEDUM, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.